Adjusting settings in Robot Studio. When you first go to use Robot Studio, there are a variety of different settings that you might want to look at and make adjustments to. Let's take a look at some of those right now. When you first come into the software, you're going to see a screen that looks something like this. When it comes to adjusting options, we want to go to this Options menu. The first setting that we're going to take a look at is Autosave, and we're going to make sure that the Autosave is set up correctly for what we need. The autosave function is a function that allows Robot Studio to automatically save your software at periodic intervals to help minimize the chance of data loss should the software close unexpectedly for some reason. The default settings here are 20 minutes and 3 backups to keep. If you're starting to have some problems with your computer or you know you're in an unreliable environment, you might want to adjust these settings and decrease the interval in between saves and maybe increase the number of backups. Next, we'll take a look at some of the default save locations for files. By clicking on the Files and Folders section here, at the top, we're going to see this User Documents location. This User Documents location tells Robot Studio where to, by default, look for things like the Libraries and Geometries folder. In this case, we're going to leave that one alone. One of the settings that we do want to change, however, is we want to change this Locations of Solution, or Solution Location. To do this, we're going to click on the 3 little dots here. And I've created a file on my desktop, or a folder, sorry, on my desktop, called RS Video Demos. I'm going to use the Solutions file within that RS Video Demos folder to store all of my solutions. Once you've made this change, go ahead and hit Apply, and that will lock that change in so that it doesn't accidentally get unchanged. We want to keep this automatically create document subfolders checked so that when Robot Studio goes to create a solution, it will have the ability to create whatever folders it requires in order to keep your solution organized. Next, we want to take a look at those document locations. So a few minutes ago, I mentioned about libraries and geometry. Libraries are pre-built items that you can bring in that have specific properties for Robot Studio, whereas geometries are essentially a CAD file developed in some other software and then imported into Robot Studio. By default, these two locations are going to be found at C, Users, Your User, Documents, Robot Studio / Libraries, and Geometry. What we want to do for our course in preparation is we want to go in and we want to add 2 more locations. The locations that we're going to add, we do this by going Add Location, File System. We're going to type in the name of the location. So Student Libraries. And we're going to look for the path, and the path for these can be found at O, Student, Manufacturing and Automation, Data, MET Automation, Robot Studio, and then finally Libraries. We'll select that folder, and then we'll go down to Show as Gallery in the. The menu that we want to show this in is we want to show this in the Library menu because this is a student library that we're trying to bring in. We want to make sure to check this box to turn it on, and you might get this warning saying that this gallery is in a remote location, might load slowly. We're going to accept this message, and we're going to set this to a recursive library. Now, you've got 2 options. You can set either as a flat or recursive. The difference between the two, in a flat library, what you have is every single file that meets that criteria to be a library component is going to show up in one large list. This will make a lot more sense when we go to view these later. My personal preference is that I like to use the recursive library style, because in the recursive library, if I create a folder underneath my library folder, when I go to browse those documents and browse these libraries, it will actually show those separate folders and organize things just a little bit better. We want to make sure that it's searched when searching all locations. And then lastly, to help prevent that delay in seeing the items, we're going to cache the files from network. You can leave this directory the same. And we're going to say OK. And now we've got that file added. So let's go in and let's add the geometries location. The file system, student geometry. And we're going to hit the three little dots again. Go up one directory to Robot Studio, grab geometry, select the folder, cache the files. It is a import geometry, recursive, and include when searching. Say OK, and close. That's kind of all the setup that we need to do under files and folders. Now we're going to add two new locations to screenshot and screen recorder. Because I want these to fall under my RS video demos. So I'm going to take and select this, use Control-C on my keyboard to copy it. And I'm going to go in here and say location. And up in the address bar, if I paste this, it will jump me to that folder and I can see, I have a folder called screenshots. So we'll select that and apply. Then we'll go to screen recorder and we'll do the same thing with videos. And wouldn't you know it, I've already created a file called videos as well. So we'll add that. And now I'm going to, on purpose, not hit apply here because I want to show you what happens if we click off onto some other area. When you click off onto some other area, you'll notice that this little star shows up. This star tells you that you've made a modification to a setting on that tab and you haven't saved it yet. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to say apply, and then now when I click off onto the next item that we're going to look at, which is synchronization, that star has gone away. So now let's look at synchronization. The synchronization option. As you may know from working with robots in your robotics course or in your programming level 1, if you've taken that course, you have paths and targets and tool data and work objects. These are various items used by your controller for a variety of different reasons. And by default, when you're working on a real-world controller, you get the option of where you want to save tool data and work object data. Paths and targets are typically saved to the program that you're actively working in. This is known as the module, and in particular, Module 1. What I want to do here is these are the defaults. I actually want everything to be saved to Module 1. So I'm going to type these in. Be cautious not to hit the Enter key when you're doing this, because if you do, it adds the setting and closes your options window. So now we got to go back and reopen that. We go back to synchronization. We can see that, yep, it didn't lose anything. It saved all those settings, so we're good to go. We've got two more things here that we're going to take a look at. The first thing that I want to show you is actually an option that we're not going to change anything on, but I want to talk about what it does so that you know for later. We're going to take a look at simulation clock. Now, what simulation clock is simulation clock inside Robot Studio. Robot Studio has the ability to run a simulation that can simulate and accurately simulate the real world environment of your machine that's running. This means that you can take a existing application, you can pull it into Robot Studio, you can make some adjustments, fine-tune some things, test it out, and see if it's going to take less time to run than the current application is, to see whether or not it's worthwhile making those fixes for a variety of different reasons, whether it's going to improve quality or whether it's going to improve processing time. Robot Studio gives you the ability to do that. It also allows you, or Robot Studio also will allow you to create a simulation for a process that's currently being done in some other manner, be it manual or semi-automated, and see what the actual time frame would be to create and get that entire operation in production through entirely automated processes. Now, in order to do this, one of the things that we need to factor in is we need to think about how long that these simulations are going to be. In some processes, your process might take 30 to 40 minutes. Now, you don't necessarily want to sit there at your computer for 30 to 40 minutes every time you make a small adjustment to the simulation to see if you've made a huge, or if you've made a difference in the processing time. So one way to fix this is we can actually go into the simulation clock here and change the simulation speed. Now, the cool thing about the simulation speed is while it increases the simulation speed of what you see on your screen, the actual clock and the amount of time, the clock that runs in the background that keeps track of how long the operation is and how long the operation is taking, that will still go based on the time that it would actually take the controller to run this. So this gives you the ability that you can actually go in and you can move this slider and increase our simulation to 200% of the speed. Or we can turn on this as fast as possible, which will run the simulation as fast as your computer can possibly compute. So the more powerful your computer, the faster it can run that simulation, and the less time you have to wait to find out whether or not your change has made an impact to your production. We're just going to leave all of those settings as they are for now, but in later videos, we'll go through and change that. The last thing that I want to show you is collision. Now, by default, I'll hit the default button here, and this should put everything back. By default, your software will actually give you the ability to pause or stop the simulation at collision. So you can actually turn on collision detection within your simulated process and find out whether or not your robot is going to collide with a variety of different objects that you've built in your surroundings. This can be fantastic in that it can actually save companies a ton of money in potential cost of rebuild and reworking of things should the simulation go awry, or should the actual operation go awry because something was misplaced. This gives you the ability in Robot Studio to test out new locations, new layouts, and make sure that your robot isn't going to hit something before you actually put it into a production environment. I like to leave this pause stop simulation at collision off, but in some of your later lessons, you might want to turn this on. When we're done, you can say OK. And that's it for setting up Robot Studio to be ready to go for our video series. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.